we were able to bring some of the few experts who can answer probably to their best of the knowledge some of the answers that we are seeking for. And so I ask for respect and mutual respect to gain understanding. And if we still don't have the answers, we can continue these dialogues. That's why the dialogues don't stop. It's like a campaign. You increase and decrease the volume whenever necessary, right? So there was the speaker in front of a crowd, and he was invited as a chief guest. So he or she had the mic and she started speaking. And this crowd was like listening, oh wow, and they clapped and she spoke, right? And then she spoke, Melanie. She continued to speak. And then people are like, okay. And then some of the young kiddos are yawning. And one young fellow actually showed his watch and said, don't you think it's a little bit time to, but she still continued to speak. And then finally, the young fellow who was very impatient got up with a bat, right? And started walking towards the chief guest. And then the chief guest said, hey, spare me, sorry, spare me. And then the guy says, the young fellow says, not to worry, I'm here looking for the person who invited you to speak. So I like the mic, but today what I'm going to do is share it with our panelists. So it's a good thing to share and hear, and I'm glad they're going to be enjoying to share some knowledge with you all as well. I'd like, even though I sent their brief bios on the emails, if you have not received it, what I'm going to do is briefly introduce Manharji, who's to your left, to your right, probably, to your right. And so Manharji, and I know all of them except Dr. James just recently, but we've been involved in an interfaith conversation for almost a year or two by now. Manharji is an expert in the Hindu religion. He calls himself a chaplain with no complaints. How cool is that? So he also teaches at every university, right? And if I missed anything, and that's very important, you can also chime in when you're ready to speak, Manharji. And Manharji also did his studies in South Africa, and at that time he thought that being associated with the white South Africans was a privilege. So he associated with them, but they never brought him in. So then he learned that then he moved to the African Americans in South Africa, or South Africans who were blacks, I should say that. And then he realized he wants to be on the side who accepts him, rather than to prove himself to the side that hasn't accepted him. So thank you for sharing that with us, Manharji. Next we have a very young, dynamic person, Imam. He's also involved in our interfaith connections. His name is Imam Abdul Jabbar. He is a youth director and probably, if I'm not mistaken, the youngest of all of us, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm younger than you.
Me too.
So Imam Jabbar is the youth director for 2 mosques in Atlanta. One is the Al Farouk Mosque, and the other one is the Omar bin Abdul Aziz. I believe that's in Roswell, Norcross, and is a very dynamic leader of all the youth in the communities. And then we have...
He's my neighbor.
He's also... Really?
Mission.
Yes, Chinmaya Mission and your mosque.
Both studying in South Africa.
Oh, yeah, okay, awesome, okay. So Imam Jabbar likes to share his food, except when it comes to shrimp and grits. It's like, no way. Next we have Melanie, Reverend Melanie Iyer. I came to know her very nicely last year. She is very, very humble, down-to-earth person. You get to know her a lot. No matter how you attack her on any side, she'll always come back to you with love and make you understand. But I don't know how you were a lawyer like that.
That wasn't a very good one.
So she said says that the past 25 years that she worked as a lawyer, now she is, we call it like Paap ko Sin ko Thona, right? So she's now become the minister to sort of wear off or balance the lawyers' fights that she had to fight for. So thank you for being here, Melanie. Next we have Gulberg Singh Basiji. Thank you so much for being here. And definitely after the event, if you want to learn some Bhangra dance steps, which I do, I'm going to stay back and he's going to teach us 3 steps. Roland, you're in, right? Awesome. Okay. So, and he's also a soccer player, a very well-known, renowned community member in the Sikh community. Is always very humble and quiet and passionate. He presented commissioners at Fulton County on the Sikh faith, and in the end he sort of said, can you all help us develop this program in Gwinnett County? And I did try to help and reach out to the Gwinnett County, which didn't help that much because they said they're not ready yet. So opportunities when the doors are open, that's really good for us, where we can spread the message. So thank you so much, Basiji, for being here. And he's also a passionate soccer player. That's his passion. So if you all want to learn soccer. And we have Dr. James Tanedi, the newest member in the team. Just came to know him like probably a month ago. And thank you for very humble to be having your introduction here. He's a historian of religion, teaches at the Interdenominational Theological Center. Do you call yourself an Ambedkarian? Is that right, Doctor? You accept his principles, Dr. Ambedkar's. Okay. He has written extensively on Dalits and Christianity in India. So again, thank you so much for being here. As we all know, and if you all can use that mic on the other side, yes. The first question that we all have, so you all will have an opportunity to ask questions. The last half an hour to 45 minutes is completely interaction. But before that, I wanted to make sure some of the questions that you all have asked during your registration, but also some of the questions that I was able to put together to start the discussion is what I wanted to do. So Manharji, and probably after you speak, we can hand the mics to others as well. Manharji, the core principles of religion as growing up as a child of everyone is be peaceful, be kind, be compassionate, be loving, forgive. The core principles of almost many of the religions or all religions is the same, if you think so. But has there ever been a stage where you felt different or people have looked different at you and you sort of paused or said, what was that about? Do you know what I mean? So have you ever felt that from the communities? And also, what would you like others to know about your faith? And it's the same question for others. So have you ever paused because people thought you were different? And how did you react? But also if you can elaborate on your religion.
See, we as Hindus, especially I'm looking at my perspective from South Africa, because third generation raised outside India, and having had the exposure to both the Dutch and the British, who naturally were the ruling class, so we felt as brown skin more privileged than the black skin. So we identified with them naturally, but when it came to going to college or sharing the political rights, we were denied. So we were caught between the two. But what was nice was we had Islam in South Africa, and we had ANC, the black. So from a practical perspective, although we dressed like the white men, and some of the Islamic brothers dressed the way they dressed, and naturally they were wearing their white pants, which looked like pajamas, but they were accepted by the blacks. So we felt the strength from their connection that they are able to represent themselves, and yet we wanted to hide from this clothing which was identified with kurta, etc. So this dress-up problem was external. But once we found out that if we were privileged, we could wear those same clothes in that community and they would welcome us. So ultimately we had to look for our own identity. And once I found what my true identity is, I am who I am. And I can't change that. But being a Hindu, I was able to then broadcast and say, I'm proud to be who I am. But we were caught between the two. And yet, the strength came like Gandhiji in South Africa because Islam was there and ANC was there. And these two communities with Hindus were able to take the non-white issue on the table. And Gandhi was the first person to have an all-community conference in South Africa that included coloreds, blacks, whites, brown skin, everybody. And he defied that because he said, I want to take this as a lawyer and I want to have this meeting where everybody can meet like here and be able to talk freely. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Imam Jabbar?
Thank you so much. So I do apologize. I came in a bit late. I have a back issue, so when I came in, I met some people, and then I just sat back down, just relaxed a little bit. So I do apologize if I didn't get a chance to say hello to Melanie and others. So I do relate. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
Can we? Is that good?
Okay.
There you go. Thank you. So while I was in South Africa for about 7 years, and what my brethren here, what he's mentioning is very familiar to me of seeing people of different faith coming together for a common struggle. But nevertheless, for me, the time where I had to kind of pause and really ask myself, I was a bit young at that time. I was in 4th grade. I was in the library, and suddenly the alarm went off. The librarian in my elementary school came and shut the door. She said the school is in a lockdown. This was 2001, September 11th. And the entire school went on lockdown. The person that was sitting next to me was a class old friend, Courtney, and she looked at me after the TV was turned on, and she looked at me and she said, aren't you also a Muslim? Because in some of the broadcasts, immediately they went for, it was Muslim or Islamic extremism, which is actually an oxymoron in itself because of what the meaning of Islam is and what extremism is. But nevertheless, so that was a time where after that, post 2001, I had to really ask myself, because my life was basketball, growing up in more of the Johnson Fair area in DeKalb County. I grew up with a dominant African-American community. I actually attended the African-American church, Baptist church. If you've been to a Baptist church, you know what happens. So I'm very familiar with different religions. One of my best friends, Ari, was Jewish by faith, although him, nor I, nor my friend David was Christian, were practicing, but we related and we loved one another, and we thought we were boys, and we are still boys. One still lives in DeKalb, one moved to Pagoda, Colombia, because he was tired of the American life. He was like, this materialistic life I'm tired of, so he moved to Pagoda, Colombia, and he's enjoying his life there with his wife and 3 kids. But that was a time, and post 9/11 was a time where I did question my faith, and I had to ask myself, what is it? That which is being portrayed on TV, is that me? Is that what I believe? So I did have to go on some soul searching to figure out, why am I a Muslim, and do I accept being a Muslim? The more I looked into it, the more I fell in love with the faith. I looked into other faiths also, but I fell in love with the faith of the youngest out of the Abrahamic faith. So that was a moment where I had to do soul searching. The second part of the question you mentioned?
Can you tell us more about your faith? Elaborate on your faith.
I think about Islam as well as Christianity and Judaism. If you look at, like, in Christianity, you have the cardinal values, honor and love and respect and so on and so forth. And Islam and Judaism, in Islam we call it Sharia, which is a very fearful word in the West for some reason. In reality, the word Sharia, and in Hebrew, because they're both similar languages, it's called halakha. And halakha means the same meaning as the Sharia. And if you look at the values, the Islamic values, and the cardinal values of Christianity, and you compare them with the values of Judaism, they're very similar in different words, conveyed by different prophets, but emanating from the same source, right? So in Islam, one of the things that really, the holistic idea of Islam can be encapsulated into 5 of the main values of the faith, which is protection of faith, protection of life, protection of lineage, protection of property, and protection of, I forget the 5th one, but there are 5 values. So when I looked into that, the idea of what the faith promotes, that's what I fell in love with.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Melanie, before you speak, please know that there's some pakoras and chaat masala and teas and water, so please help yourself. It's okay to take some seconds and thirds as well. Okay? Go ahead, Melanie.
Thank you, Nazeera. And I can attest, it's delicious. I know Nazeera said, Melanie, it's going to be Indian food, but you're going to love it. So,
Thank you, Melanie.
it's very delicious. And thank you so much for organizing this. It's a funny question for me because the question was, when do you ever feel excluded? Or that's the way I understood the question to be. And I do not feel excluded all that much because I'm a white American. I mean, I grew up as an Episcopalian in New York, and I was surrounded by other people who looked just like me. And so my challenge has been to be aware of what others feel and be aware of the prejudices that I grew up with just because I live in this country and I'm 62 years old. There's no way that I could grow up living in this culture and not feel something that I need to take a look at and shake it out and make sure that's how I want to feel. The most I've come to feeling excluded is, I have a very different family right now. My wife and I have adopted 3 kids. They're now young adults. I'm not allowed to call them kids. But they, 2 African Americans and Hispanic, and the 2 African American young adults are multiply handicapped. And so they still live at home and will for the longest time. So any prejudice that I have experienced comes from being around them and seeing other people react to them and react to my family, which is just about as an unusual family as I can identify. 2 gay women raising 3 multicultural, multi-handicapped kids. My joke is, there's not a minority we have not hit. But my kids also teach me that they look at the world and they don't see the differences. I tell a story about my daughter, Catherine, who is African American, and we were in Cleveland, Tennessee, going to my wife's Baptist church, all white Baptist church. Catherine is African American, it's Easter, and she has cerebral palsy, so she can't wear normal shoes. She was wearing sneakers. So she's going into this all-white church, and she's worried. She says, they're going to look at me. I look so different. And I said, Catherine, what's the matter? She said, I'm wearing sneakers. It's like, okay. She's going to be the only little African-American face in there, but I'm wearing sneakers. And that's the way she saw the world. It's like that was what made her different. So, my kids are my best teachers, that we need to focus more on what joins us and rather than what separates us, because there is so much more that joins us than separates us. Nazeera told a joke about me practicing law for 25 years and litigating, which I did, and I still do. And it was basically very contentious and very nasty, and lawyers fight, and you go home and you don't really feel good about that. So a couple of years ago, I went to an interfaith seminary in New York and was ordained an interfaith minister, and now I'm the spiritual leader of a small interfaith community in Roswell called One World Spiritual Center. And people look at me and they say, what does that mean? What do you believe? What is an interfaith church, or what is an interfaith center? And what we teach, I personally grew up in the Christian faith, and I still call myself a Christian with a small c. I had a friend at work years ago who came up and said, I'm just worried that you believe that Jesus is divine, don't you? And I said, well, yes, I do. But what I didn't say was, and so are you. Because I think that might have just put her a little sideways. But what we believe is that we are all manifestations of God. We are all expressions of God. We are all the hands and the feet and the voice of God here on earth, and that's why we're here. And in my community, we teach from all the scriptures. We teach from the Bible, from the Quran, from the Vedas, from the Tao, from any wisdom teacher we can find, teaching that the reason we're here is to serve each other and love each other and be compassionate and leave it a better place than we found it. Because the way we look at it is we're all walking up the same mountain. We may be taking different paths and the scenery may be different, but we're all walking up the same mountain toward the same God. So that is my long answer to your short question. And again, thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much, Melanie. As you talked about your kid, 4 years ago, I did a quick research. I asked many people, who are you?
And almost all of them sort of responded by saying, which faith or their name or their profession or their socioeconomic status. And then finally, my daughter, who was 6 then, was sitting in the back of the car, and I asked her, "Who are you?" And she said, "What?" I said, "Who are you?" She said, "Mom, I'm a human." And that was the answer I was looking for, really. And then here I said, the 6-year-old, like you said, she looked at the shoes and didn't think she was different from others. So I guess, how do we go back, and when did we lose that innocence and come to this stage? So thank you so much for sharing that. Vasiji, here, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Lady. I came prepared to share my time with local community, and what I see in front of me is more or less everybody, quite a few interfaith and interested community. I can see that everybody in the audience appears to me that you're already aware of what's going on in most faiths. Nothing new. Now, to address your question, have I ever felt excluded? Wow, loaded question for me. I've been here since 1964. Some of our audience members may not have been even born then. From day number one, yes, I was among the very first Sikh representatives. I was the only one in the university I went to, and then most of the towns I lived in. That was the case. Hardly anybody knew what a Sikh is. And my first outside experiences were, whenever I went to a store, department store, the kids would go around the corner, say, "Genie!" and run away. So that was my experience with the little kid in this country. Another experience, remember the Iran crisis? Some of us probably do. More than once, I was called Khomeini when I'm walking around in a parking lot somewhere. So people will drive by, "Khomeini, go home." Anything else they would say. And another experience I'll share with you, on 9/11, when it happened, I happened to be in my office, and there were some other co-workers around me, and my manager came to me and said, "Gogi," that's my nickname, "Gogi, go home and stay home 2, 3, 4 years until it's calm." So he left me immediately, told me to go home. And you know what? It's that simple. So, and many times afterwards. So there are enough of my experiences that you know what. Now I think the entire audience is aware of what Sikh faith is. I would like to share a few fundamentals, which you may already know, and maybe you don't. All right? First thing is, the founder of the Sikh faith, Guru Nanak, his first sermon was, neither there in India at that time, two predominant religions were Hindu and Islam, Muslims. His first sermon was, neither there is Hindu, there's anyone Hindu, nor there are Muslims. We are, this body and the soul is the gift of the Allah and Ram. Totally tore down the walls of the religions. We now talk about humanity, we now talk about one source, and we are all created by that source. And that is exactly the day the founder of Sikh faith said. Now, when we say Sikh faith, at times I say, wait a minute. Sikh philosophy does not talk about who's a Sikh and who's not a Sikh. The philosophy is saying we all have faith in the Creator. And all those who have faith in the Creator, they are faithful people. Doesn't matter what philosophy they believe in. So as far as the Sikh is concerned, it's not a different faith. We may other, I don't even want to use the word other. There is no other. We are all one. We seem to somehow refer to a philosophy we believe in by some name. That's all. And that is where the entire Sikh philosophy begins. One Creator, one family. And we all belong to the same faith, whatever you want to call it. Faith in the Creator. And everything else follows from that. 5 major principles. See the one in everyone at all times. Once you see that, be honest, live an honest life. How can you be anything but honest when you see the one in everyone? That's fundamental. Earn your needs. We sometimes say earn your living. Earn whatever you are looking for, whatever you need. If I need food, earn it. Don't take it from somebody, don't steal it. Earn it, deserve it. Share with everybody else whatever you have. And that's common. I don't know any faith that doesn't say that. Serve the one's creation. Service means without anything in return, without expectations, only service. And those are the basic principles. Any question you ask, I will be giving the answers based on just that. Thank you.
Honestly, I'm honored to be with these friends. And I learned a lot, both through our phone conversations and emails, and meeting you in person, and to be in your presence as well. To let you know about my faith, I always say there is a part of me which is Hindu, because I grew up as a Christian family, one Christian family, in a predominantly Hindu community, which even today votes Marxist when elections come. So there is part of me which is Marxist, part of me which is Hindu, part of me Christian, and at the core, ours happens to be the only outcast family in the entire neighborhood. So when we went to school, people stared at us. Of course, my father's generation, he couldn't make it. And when we went, school ends, we come back, and we had none to play with. So that explains it. And that if you talk about Andhra Pradesh, Hinduism, our Hinduism is born out of Buddhism. It's the other way around. So our texture of our Hinduism is slightly different. So a part of me is Buddhist too. So growing up in my early 20s, as an outcast, Dalit, we had a role model, that is Ambedkar. Somebody who wanted to prove to the world with education, with organizing. By questioning people and demanding rights, you can make it. And somebody who proved it. And if you grew up like Gandhi, in late 19th century and early 20th century, like Nehru, like Ambedkar, there is something common about them. All of them are children of modernity, whether you like it or not. So the 3 principles that went around in those days. 1, brotherhood, universal brotherhood and sisterhood, fraternity. Other one is freedom. When you dream of a universal God's household, there needs to be something called everyone needs to be free. That's the reason of the whole freedom struggle. For Ambedkar, there's one more leg to it, that is social equality. And I'll use the image of, it's not two eyes. If one eye is not doing well, other eye makes up. But for Ambedkar, it is like the bicycle. If there are two pedals, you put equal pressure on both so that the bicycle can move on. Remember those bullet carts when I grew up in India, which had two large wheels. If one decides not to move, other would not move. For Ambedkar, freedom and equality should go hand in hand. And you know what? Religion should play the role of an agent to create that universal humanhood, family where everyone is free, everybody is equal. And you know what he decides? He decides to, which I did not, okay? He decided to embrace Buddhism. And you know, three things that he said. In Buddha's teaching, and of course now I begin to ask those questions. As I ask about Christianity, I ask about Buddhism now. According to the original Dhamma, that is compassion, don't be violent towards others. Knowledge, which he stood for, going to University of Mumbai, Columbia University, London School of Economics, and equality. Again, the same theme runs through. And me, of course, having grown up in a Christian family, that's what we've been told. We've been told, and of course, we had our problems, but always, wherever I was alone. Maybe one or two other Christian kids in our high school. Most of the teachers were Baptists. I do remember, of course, there are some who made fun of us, but there one or two would call us and say, you know what, James, you'll do well in life. So my father taught us one thing, that's very formative, that is, show grace and find grace wherever you are. I think that's what, of course, for him, Ambedkar, equality, and a part of me which says, find grace and show grace. And you would agree with it. Be compassionate. I think, did I respond to both your questions? Thank you, thank you.
So, Manharji, the next question is for you. The question I have is, what is that if you remember a parable or a story or a scripture from your way of faith that has caught your attention, if you can tell the audience, if it might be in a story form or a faith in your language, but and why? Why did it catch your attention?
Take it from the behind, yes. And just to remind the audience, the food is still here, so go ahead and get your pakoras and hot tea, and also the chaat. Tracy, I know you came a little bit late, so please make sure your mom and dad get it too.
They want us to be at the center stage. Not that it matters. But it's a good question. What is it in my specific faith as a Hindu that attracted me? Although in my early childhood, I went to missionary school. So I had an exposure to the Bible before I came to learn of our own Gita. So I was already exposed, and with fellow beings like my brother here, my best friend was a Muslim. So I could go to his mosque, and he'd say, come on, we're going to have a nice chicken after that. And I said, wonderful. So for me, to be able to grow up in that type of environment was conducive to asking questions. Who am I? And although I grew up in a Hindu family, my mother was educated enough to tell me that your root, your heritage, you cannot deny. And do not try and take something that doesn't belong to you. Meaning, unless you understand what it is. So I had a chance to look at all of them as closely as I could. In high school, the question came up, This question was that college which would give me a free scholarship if I accepted Christian faith, which means I could study further, but I had to take the Bible with one hand, and I rejected the Bible. This is an issue that we all have to face. Where do you make the decision which is right or truth that you ultimately believe in, for which you stand up? So that question was, for me, very simple. Is money worth anything? Is name worth anything? Name and fame. If you're willing to give that up, that's when you begin to say, this is what the truth is. So in Bhagavad Gita, as I learned a little bit further, through one of our wonderful teachers, and he was very helpful even in my college days when I had the questions and crisis, I identify with the white community. They have the privilege, the class. And yet, we don't have that structure as Hindu to be able to stand up. And the truth ultimately prevails is the way I looked at it. So what helped me tremendously was with Gandhi's campaign, with my own brothers from the Islamic faith, including the Jewish brothers, who were very vocal and very easy to work with. They were willing to give you scholarship to study in Israel. No strings attached. Now that tells you who is here to convert, who is here to make sure that you go further, and willing to make sure that you get the knowledge that you need. And ultimately, from my perspective, as I grew older and towards the 60s, I asked the ultimate question. So I went to the ashram. I said, I have to learn Sanskrit. Without Sanskrit, I don't know my own books. So I learned Sanskrit. And having learned it, I come across one word that just completely blew me away. That one subject which no one teaches today, and it is not available because it's a lost, I could call it, knowledge. And that knowledge is still available for those who are spiritually inclined. Vedanta. Ved, anta. Sanskrit word. Ved, knowledge. Anta, end. This subject will tell you that having learned that subject, there's nothing else to learn. That's the only subject. If you learn it, there's nothing else to learn. It's the end of your study. And having learned it, I know exactly where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was a great response. And thank you for sharing your personal stories as well. So this question is sort of for the audience. So we all believe in faith, but if you note the statistics, which my background is also in research, I believe in the graphs, and that's how policies are made. Unless you're able to prove a point, that's when you get a policy passed or a law passed. So so it's been shown that people who are not affiliated with any religion, or they call themselves not affiliated with any religion, or they call themselves spiritual, are growing high in number, right? They're growing high in number almost to the top 4 spots of the other major religions. What do you have to say for a person who says, I don't believe in religion, and why do you think this number is raising? Anyone who wants to start? Okay, Melanie, and then you can give it to...
Oh, okay, thank you. You know, it's interesting you said that, Nazeera, because back when we were doing the Fulton County presentation, we had a slide that showed what the numbers were. Can I just give a second to give what those numbers are?
Yes.
It's interesting. This is all these numbers are based on the census. So the last census we had was 2010, but between 2000 and 2010, the percentage of people who identify themselves as nuns, N-O-N-E-S, rose 914% in Fulton County. And now it's the second largest demographic group when you are looking to identify religious preference. You have Protestant, which is 50.1%, and then you have nuns, which is 34.2% in Fulton County. It is a huge, huge growth, and we can all ask ourselves about why that was, and there are all sorts of opinions as to why that is. A lot of people in my spiritual community come from that group, because they grew up in a more traditional church, and it wounded them. I mean, they will not want, for a great many of them don't want to hear about the Bible. My joke is I can say, Rumi said X, Y, and Z, and they'll go, oh, how deep. But then I say, Jesus said X, Y, and Z, and they're like, stop talking about Jesus. I know my son doesn't want to go to church because he says, I just don't want to hear about Jesus. I said, neither does anyone at my church. Come on, it's fun, you'll love it. But it's a wound that some of these people carry, and it's taking a bit of time for them to get past it. And I think in part, in my experience, they tell me it's because of judgment, and it's because of rules, and it's because the organized religion that they experienced got away from the love of God. It turned into rules and dogma instead of compassion and acceptance and welcoming and love, which was the message that was taught by all our faiths. But instead, it has turned into something which is cold and judgmental and not welcoming. So when I look at why that number of nuns has grown, it's not people who don't believe in God so much anymore, even though there are many of them, and that's fine. It's people who don't believe in religion. It's people who want to find God in their hearts and want to experience God and go out and serve humanity, and that may be where they find God, but they're not going to find it sitting in a building listening to a bunch of rules and being told they need to believe something which for them does not make sense. They're looking for the experience, not the rules.
I'd like to give an opportunity to all the panelists to answer that. Yes. And you all please sit down if you all can see.
Very interesting question, and I bet every single faith community, every single faith center is looking for answers to this one question. How come our next generation of youth isn't interested in the faith anymore, or they don't want to come to temple, synagogue, church, whatever the name we wish to say? The answer, I'm not sure it's all one simple answer. However, what I think, that's what I would share with you, but I'm not sure I know it, and I'm not going to say I know it all. Absolutely not. What I find in this generation is because of education. They are looking for reasoning for everything. Unless there is a reason, they don't want to believe it. It's that simple. And very important part in the thinking that, by the way, I teach youth classes at our Gurdwara. That's the place for Sikh worship place, or actually Sikh center, spiritual center. And I interact with youth. I get their questions, and I'll tell you one of the questions that is going to interest. One young lady, around 11 years of age, came to me and says, Uncle, they called me Uncle Basi. Uncle, are we really going to go to hell because we are Sikhs? Think about it, where that came from. The kids are at 11 years of age are asking those questions. And then when we teach the philosophy, if it makes sense, they'll accept it. And if it doesn't, they won't. And by the way, just to give you the faith group that I am dealing with in the youth, when they come to my class, they're always almost ready to say, I don't want it. At the end of the class, they say, I believe you. What I'm bringing is, I'm going to do a little bit harping on humanity. What I'm bringing is that the philosophy, the faith, the Sikh faith is, what they teach, is what we are all talking about anyway. So the kids say, okay, now I believe you. And another few things I'm quoting from what scripture is totally consistent with science. Our scriptures, 6 scriptures say, look at what's happening. God created the laws to run this creation. Learn them, know them. That is what the Creator's laws are. That is how you need to live. Live according to the laws that are created by the Creator. And of course, the Big Bang Theory is right there, and the evolution is right there. So it all makes sense. At the end of the day, the youth that I teach, they come back to me and say, yes, I believe you. So it is what we teach them. And if we're going to teach them the laws that we just mentioned, do this, you can't do this, you have to believe this, they will not want it. The negativity is taught either at family level or at church level or some level. If we stop teaching that negativity, we'll have brotherhood in this world. Thank you.
I occasionally teach undergraduate students religion, okay? And every fourth sitting there does not believe in religion. The moment they see me for the first time, they think, okay, he's a dinosaur walking in to teach religion. That's there. I do tell them, Ambedkar would say this, if the temple is closed, find God out there. If the church is closed, find God out there. You don't have to wait for the doors to be open. I say, I respect your faith. And there is one Indian Native American lady who taught me, wherever you find meaning, that's what your religion is. And I tell them, you found truth, I'm proud of you. And as has been pointed out earlier, we need to be honest, especially in interfaith dialogues, to be able to name the ways that we have failed as religious communities and institutions. It's not like you're good, I'm good. We need to be honestly, humbly, hopefully name those aspects of our faith that have failed the youth. And I think that's where renewal begins. And that's my message to them. You found the truth, continue to search. That's not the end. Okay? And we respect your faith. Faith dialogue, and at the beginning of it, what he sees himself as born-again Christian came. By the way, I'm a practicing Christian. I'm a Presbyterian minister. Here I am with a clergy collar. He cursed at me in the name of Christ. Said, which Bible did you read? Of course, I said, peace be with you, but which Bible did you read? One example. Crisis in Sri Lanka with Tamils. Rohingya crisis in Burma. I begin to ask, which Buddha's Dhamma did you read? Those friends who go after lynching those beef eaters, I asked them, which scriptures have you read? One answer is, hey, they don't read. That's one answer. The second thing, they listen to those political interests and economic interests and say, okay, we are going to go for it. They get easily carried away. That's one. You're putting the blame on someone who uses religion for their own political and economic interests. That's one response. The second response should be, as those people of faith should be able to ask ourselves, is there anything in our faith or in our scripture which becomes the source of violence? Let's be honest. There are parts, let's say in the Bible or any other book, which do legitimize or justify, or in the Vedas or in the holy books, certain kind of behavior, and we need to recognize their limitations and begin to ask difficult questions about our own faith, about our own scriptures, about our own traditions. I think that's where I think we can liberate religion from religion itself, okay, and from those vested interests that want to exploit religion for their ends. Okay, thank you.
So the question is, why do people exploit religion and create situations of violence and hate? That's how I interpret the question. Well, because we're people, and because people do that. I mean, when you look at, I mean, that's why we're in these human suits, because we are trying to, this is me talking, because we're trying to awaken and enlighten to the point where we don't do that. So we look at scripture and we look at wisdom teachers, and we try to deal with this messy, crazy world and all the chaos and all the problems in a way that reflects our better angels, in a way that reflects that we are expressions of God. But that's not always easy. There's a story about a yogi master coming down from the mountain. He had been on the mountain for 30 years, and he had found enlightenment, and he had found peace. He's walking down the mountain, and he meets 3 villagers. And the villagers say, "Tell me what you learned." "I found peace." "No, seriously. Tell me seriously. How did you find peace? What happened? I mean, what did you go through?" "I found peace." "No, that's not enough." By the end of this, he's screaming at these people because he had found peace until he met other people. And then he became less peaceful. So, as we grow in consciousness, we will do better at applying these principles of virtue and compassion and love, even when it's hard. But we are flawed. I mean, we are in these human suits, and we are just trying to do better as we grow. And now there are more of us. And as my brother here said, we're in each other's faces all the time. We're not just little pockets here and there. I can turn on my computer and find out about 19 different tragedies in 5 seconds all over the world. So I have to know how to deal with that, and I have to know what I can do as an individual citizen to try to make my world a better place, and that may be the better question. What can we do to make sure that our world reflects the virtues that we live? Well, we can, when we face the political world, we can elect leaders that reflect our values, that reflect values of compassion, and that take the long view. There's a great Native American principle. They call it to the 7th generation. And you may have heard of it. It means that any decision we make now, individual, global, community, we have to take into account what impact will that have on the 7th generation. And in the Lakota tradition, that's 100 years per generation. So are we doing that? One may argue we are not. So when people use religion to exploit it, they are just using, it's very powerful to say God wants you to do this. That is so much more powerful than saying, I really think you should do this. I, Melanie, think you should do this. Well, like, whatever. But if God wants you to do it, then stand back. You're going to do it. And I think that's one reason people exploit it, because they want their selfish ends achieved, and that is a great excuse. Thank you. Is everybody okay?
So I would restructure the question, and as my sister Melanie's saying that it's, for me, as again Melanie, a bit of a rebel, I would say the question isn't why does religion promote. It's because we're human. Why do humans promote violence? And usually it's not, the question is there something as evil religion or evil faith? There's no such a thing. Because evil has no faith. Evil has no belonging. However, religion is close to people's hearts. That's why it is utilized by social, political, economic reasons. But I don't believe, and factually don't know of that somebody who is religious or non-religious, that they're prone to more violence or not. Because if you look in a post, during the World War and post the Second World War, some of the worst, injustices against humanity were done by people who proclaim atheism. You know, if you look at Lenin, if you look at the Marxist thought, if you look at what is his name, Mao Zedong in China, these were atheist leaders who didn't believe in God, but they carried out some of the worst. Hitler didn't believe in God. These were the worst criminal offenses in the history. It's not because of religion. Because at the core of religion, we're not taught to hate. Like, I was just sharing with my wife on the way here. I was saying, because one of the questions that I read was about mutual respect beyond tolerance. Do we tolerate one another or do we respect one another? And I think the question is about respect more than tolerance today. Because, imagine if I go up to my wife and I say, hey, look, man, I love you, but just letting you know, I am tolerating you in this house. Well, let me just tell you, I won't be tolerated in that house anymore, right? So it's not about tolerance, it's about respect. And I said, the verse that really sticks out when I hear that question is in the Quran, where God tells us that in Arabic, لا تسبوا الذين يدعون من دون الله, that don't curse the idols of those who call unto idols other than your God. Don't curse the gods of others, lest they should turn and curse your God out of ignorance. So meaning so that's, I think, faith at the core of all of us. Not to look down upon anyone. As a Muslim, our faith is you can't look down upon a Hindu. You can't look down upon a Christian. Because God at the end of that verse says, God will take care of it. You were never put in charge. In our faith, we don't believe the Prophet had legislative power. Only God did. He didn't have so it's a very academic debate between theologians and juristic scholars. They talk about, is Muhammad a legislator or not? And majority say no, he was not a legislator. Just like previous prophets, they were not legislators. They were people who conveyed the message of God. But they could not legislate something from themselves. But for me as a millennial, I don't think the question is, and this is what the discussion that I have with our youth, young professionals who are looking into religion, that because they do come from that angle where they think religion is evil. Because if you look at, God bless, Professor Dawkins and others, the beautiful work that they do, God is Dead and all these books that they write, what they're promoting is not, what they're promoting is a hatred for God. Really, if you look at the bottom of it, it's the hatred of God. They don't want God to be there. So when the kids, the young people, they soak that up, they have this, understanding of faith, that faith is evil. It leads to division. Actually, it doesn't. So far, I think if you're listening to what we're all saying, there's synonymous message coming from all of us. So I don't see. There's a book by William Kavanaugh he wrote, and I think this is a good read for all of you. I'm gonna. By the way, my wife knows the thing that disturbs her most about me is my reading. So William Kavanaugh wrote this book. It's called "The Myth of Religious Violence." You should read it. You should read it, and you will see it seldomly has to do with faith, as opposed to dealing with economic interest, social political interest. And that's what literally, when we talk about terrorism, that's all it is. That's all it is. It's not faith. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I just want to ask a few questions. Maybe not a question, sort of a quiz question with the audience, and see with the raise of hands. What do we hear, even for the panelists as well, right? So how this is going to go in the later stages. After this question, I'll direct each one of you. Might be a specific question that the audience has asked while registering, and then open up it to the audience so you have a direct connection and you can ask the questions. So what do we hear? What do we assume, right? How do we overcome prejudice? So now you have to tell me who is better, right? So I'm going to give you two parts, A and B, and you have to raise hands who is better, husband or a wife.
You have to go home.
Man or a woman, who's better and why? Man or a woman?
You're looking for show of hands?
Yeah.
You want to go back to the first? Or you just...
Husband or a wife?
And there is no third grade. You have to decide one of the two.
Yes.
And that's what you're asking us.
Okay, yes, yes.
Okay. Husband or wife?
Who's
yes,
better?
Show of hand. Wife.
Husband?
Wife.
Wife, okay, good. That's because you don't have your wife here. A man or a woman? Okay.
It's a wrong crowd, actually, you're asking.
No, I have more questions. Hold on.
I think it's the wrong question.
The theme that'll come up to.
So who is better, a believer or a non-believer, right? Who is better, vegetarian or the meat eaters?
I think it's right on that one.
Who's better? Who's better, Hindu or a Muslim? Who's better, Christian or a Jew? From what I see, from my experiences and my interactions, is I think it's about the human, because we are human. We are very competitive. So am I better than you? But I think we also relate to the wrongful things. So anything on the questions that I asked, do you see that anytime on who's proving who's better? And do we even have to prove who's better? And whom are we trying to prove? What are we trying to get to at the end of the day?
In all these questions, what is assumed is a scale, a measuring scale as to who's better. It is not the gender, it is not the faith. In fact, in 6 scriptures, there's an incident that's written in the scripture. When Guru Nanak visited Mecca for Hajj, the priest there questioned him, who's better, a Hindu or a Muslim? And his answer was, they both suffer because of their deeds. It isn't the faith that matters, it is how they live their life, and had nothing to do with faith or gender or color of the skin or anything else. So when we are talking about who's better, we're looking at some sort of a scale, right? And that scale is not in the qualifications that were read here. The scale is, what is the life, the kind of life the person is living, and those values that we, in some fashion, call it human values, our basic rights. Those are the values. If we are living accordingly, that's better. And if we're not living accordingly, that's not better. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is there
Yes.
Oh, no, the other thing that strikes me when I think about those, who's better, man or woman, wife or husband or whatever the questions were, those were good questions, is they're false divisions. What we do is we take labels and we put them on each other, and then we decide they're important. We're so efficient at hating each other. We do it so well. We decide that you're a Democrat and I'm a Republican, therefore I don't like you. Or you're a coal miner and I'm an economist and therefore whatever. We just come up with these divisions, we just create them, and what we're doing is we're focusing on the tiny things that separate us and the things that don't matter. What the challenge is we have is to focus on the things that unite us. For example, when you look at politics, you look at Democrats, you look at Republicans, whatever other parties there are, don't we all want our kids to grow up safe and securely? Yes. Don't we all want to have a strong country? Yes. Don't we all want to live in prosperity and peace and not have to listen to the news about the government every 30 seconds? Yes, we do. There are things we all want. And the fact that we may think there are different ways of getting there, don't mean to offend the government, but yeah, we set up these, we in the law we call them false conflicts. We set up these things which we think matter, labels that we think matter, and we focus on them, and we should shift our paradigm and focus on what unites us and what makes us the same, because it is so much more than what separates us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I would like to go to a couple of questions, and I'm going to direct it to the panelists according to what I feel is relating to you. And then we'll open up the floor for all of you to ask questions, okay? So Imam Jabbar, there were 2 questions. We had around 15 questions come from all of you, if you all had registered at some point. One of the questions, and I'm going to combine these 2 questions to one question, is why do majority of terrorists come from the Muslim religion? What is in their religion that drives people to war, terrorism, and suppress of women's fundamental rights? And the following question is why Muslim women do not revolt against religious oppression. So before you answer that question, my personal story is my sister still wears the burqa in India. And I revolted and I came up and I said, if I want to serve the poor, I can't just cover my head and sit there and behave as a doctor, being my profession in India. So I revolted. But when I tell her, you're in the 21st century, why are you wearing all this? She said, if I remove this, I feel naked. So I felt she is comfortable with what she was wearing. And what I was telling her to remove, she felt offended. Why do you ask me to remove something that I'm comfortable with? I'm happy with my family, with my kids, with my husband. And he helps me. We work together as a family, as any other family. So you don't have any right to come and tell me what should I wear and not wear. It's your personal choice, but you can't put that personal choice into mine. So that's just my personal story. But I'm sure as a scripture scholar, you have a different story.
So, yeah, I never saw that question coming, by the way. So that is a very common question about terrorism and things like that. So the question is false. And again, factually it's false. To say that...
Is your mic on?
Yeah, to say that majority of terrorism comes from the Muslim extremist group is completely wrong. And somebody needs to update some of our politicians about that stuff also, because being at the top, they don't know that. As you saw, Nelson Mandela, his adjacent to him was who? I forget his name. He just passed away recently.
Not Becky, you think you know?
No, the Muslim, Ibrahim. The person who was incarcerated with him was a Muslim. This was his lifelong partner who encouraged him, stood by his side, supported him. In India, the revolt against the British, it was all together effort. The indigenous people of India, the Sikh, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Muslims came together. So going back, the FBI statistics show that 94% of the terroristic acts that are carried out are non-Muslim. You have a greater chance dying from being struck by lightning than dying from a Muslim. No, seriously, I'm not. This is not a joke. This is statistic. Georgia State University, GSU, did a social project where they had their social scientists go out, and their question was, why is it that some issues in the media get more coverage than the others? And it's a 19-page article. If you want to know the in-depth answer, you can read that article, right? But again, it goes back to specific, and our beloved president, he's very supportive of this too, that the media is really against, and that's what it is. At the end of the day, media, it's about, when I took the media training classes, the first thing that my media training instructor told me really turned me off immediately. She came in and she said, listen people, media, if you don't know anything about media, people don't care about facts. The general masses do not care about facts. They go on gut instinct and feeling. And he said, psychologically, 95% of our reaction, not response, reaction is based on our gut feeling. So statistically, when you look at recorded extremism, the first extremists recorded were the Jewish zealots. They're known as the Saccharides. And they were the first, and they were called terrorists, and because again, not every act can be termed terrorism. Terrorism, by definition, it has to be something where it is done. It affects the people beyond the people that are affected, meaning the greater, and it's usually to promote an agenda, and it's usually a political agenda. That's the definition of terrorism. So what happened with the young man who went into a church and sat amongst them, or the atheist Gary Chapman, I believe, in Chapel Hill, who killed. These are, by definition, yes, there are terrorist attacks, but they're not termed. So it goes back to factually 94%. This is the FBI statistics. 94%. And this was, I was in LA. Me and my wife were in LA, and I went into a legislative briefing, and the FBI had sent somebody from HR to come and debrief clergy on statistics. And when we heard the statistics, some people in that room were very uncomfortable hearing that in America, there's more terrorist attacks from the Caucasian community more than any other. But again, it doesn't get coverage. So that's there. So factually, it's 94%. It's outside of the Islamic faith. You go to any of our, and then another thing. I'm sorry, that's why I
You
got
need
tea.
some water?
I had tea just to, because I'm taking medicine and it kind of messes with me. Another thing to understand when it comes to terrorism, if you just take Muslim extremists against, to say Islamic extremists, like I said, it's an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense. Even if I was to say Sikh extremists, it doesn't make sense because what the religion of Sikhism stands for is not extremism. So you can't couple those two. It doesn't make sense. If you look at the teachings of Jesus, to say Christian extremists doesn't make sense. It's an oxymoron. Nevertheless, to say extremism is something that roots from Islam, not only is it nonsense, but if you look at who are the most affected people of terrorism, anybody? Muslims. The people that get affected, people think Iraq is over. No, if you go to Iraq, there are people dying every single day till today because of extremism. It just doesn't get reported. And the continent, which is completely excluded out of media coverage, is Africa. When is the last time you hear about Africa? Right? And people are dying in Africa day by day because of extremism. Muslim extremism, people of other faith, extremism. So when it comes to extremism, and specifically within the Muslim community, the people that are affected the most are Muslims. The people that die from extreme attacks are who? Muslims. So you'll find Iraq on top, Afghanistan on top, Pakistan on top. These are Muslim majority countries. So, rationally, if you think, it doesn't make sense for you to go and kill your own people. So that's there. Statistically, the question is wrong. And the reason I think extremism finds its way is because of what we were talking about previously, is the way we look at our own religion and own faith. What we see, the problem comes from idealists. Idealists are people who believe that, they want this utopian world. Everything is perfect. In faith, God never intended the world to be perfect. It's a place of test and trial. If everything was going to be perfect, then how are you supposed to be judged in the court of God? If everything was supposed to be perfect. So, this idea that, that is idealists promote, and in Islam, one of the issues that we have is this, post-colonialism. We see there's a book, again, it's called The Colonizer and the Colonized. It's, again, a must read if you want to understand what colonialism did to the world. Because once you go in, and once a colonizer goes in and colonizes a people, they become interdependent. The colony depends on the colonizer, and the colonizer depends on the colony. And this again goes back to not faith, socioeconomic, political reasons. I'm going on a tangent, but nevertheless, reading is very important, people.
The other question was why Muslim women do not revolt against religious oppression.
My wife, my beloved wife, she's here and she covers. And like you said, you choose. It's again a choice. It's again your dedication to your faith. And like I said, I cannot say that my wife is more God conscious than my respected sister Nazeera, because only in the court of God do they know. Right, in the Quran, in the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon all the prophets and all the noble men of God, he said that let everyone know that a man doesn't hold, supremacy over a woman, and nor does a woman over a man, and nor does a white over a black, nor a free over a slave, or a slave over a free. But yet, the only thing that differentiates you is your consciousness of the Supreme. Your consciousness of the Supreme. So that's there. I think usually the question stems from when people they look at Saudi Arabia, That's because Saudi Arabia is usually synonymous to Islam. That's what people think. Wouldn't you guys agree? Like, people think what Saudi does is Islam. That could not be the furthest from the truth. Okay? Have you ever heard of a country in the world that's named after a family? Anybody? That one, exactly, Saudi. Can you imagine I mean, okay, now I'm going to go off. The Saudi family, that's one of the most despicable families that, I mean, despicable in the sense what they have done to hijack a faith, a people. You know, in Saudi, they don't let women drive. That's a law. That's not Islam, right? That's their law. But if you go back, there's nothing Islamic. There's nothing religiously Islamic about that country. A few months back, a cousin of mine, a distant cousin, he was working there. He passed away. A car hit him. I'm being serious, people. There's nothing Islamic about Saudi, besides the fact that the two holiest sites are in Saudi Arabia. There's nothing else holy about Saudi. If you look at the exploitation that they have, they're the only country who have named an entire country behind one family. That shows you the oppression that they have. On top of that, there are a lot of people from the Indian subcontinent that work in Saudi Arabia, in the Middle East, throughout. When I was in California, and the Qatar is going to be hosting World Cup, right? You guys know that? Any soccer fans? Do you know how many people are anticipated to die in that project? Anybody? In the building of that grand stadium that we're all going to go crazy for? Because who loves soccer here? I personally don't. But those who love soccer, I asked this to my youth, and I said, it's estimated that more than 1,000 people are going to die during that construction. I said, you still want to watch soccer? And I said, and looking at you, do you know majority of those workers are from the subcontinent? But people usually, there's nothing Islamic about that. Exploitation usually always has to do with social, economic, political reasons. Nevertheless, when it comes to Saudi or these regimes that have this this ability to kind of project what Islam is completely false. Completely false. When it comes to covering, it's not because women are oppressed. It's because it's a choice. It's your dedication to God. The covering of the Muslim woman is based on modesty. That's all it is. It's based on modesty. She should not dress, and a man also. I can't be, when I was in high school, I used to wear they call it a tank top in the South, they call it a wife beater. By no means does it mean that, by the way, political correctness. It doesn't mean a wife beater, it's just a tank top. I used to wear a tank top, and that's very provocative, but I did it for the wrong intention. So whether it's a male or a female, you're not supposed to dress provocative. You're supposed to dress modestly, and that's the idea behind. And again, people think like, I remember when I was post 9/11, there was the whole idea of, whenever they would show any extremist Muslim, they would be wearing a turban. Like a turban. They call them in the West, we call them ragheads. Turban, and they used to show this rough-looking mountain men just walking around. If you go to Afghanistan, that's how everybody dresses. Everybody dresses like that. Not the Taliban. Everybody dresses like that. But it's this alien projection that we do, and to manipulate people. But yeah, it's not about oppression. It's about a person's dedication, and a person that doesn't wear and does wear. You cannot go out there and say this person is more faithful than this person. Yeah.
Great, thank you. The next question, Melanie, is again from the audience during their registration, and they want to know, how do we keep America from excluding religious viewpoints from the public square? Or how do we go about restoring civility to American discourse?
I think the first thing we do is education. I think at the end of the day, it goes back to awareness. I think a lot of our lack of civility is based on fear that you're going to get what I think is mine. And I think in many ways it's prompted by our leaders. Many of our political leaders foster atmospheres of fear, and we just kind of walk into it. But I think that especially in the United States, as we have a tradition of civic participation, it's our duty as citizens to educate ourselves and to engage in a civil, rational way. It used to be possible, for example, for Democrats and Republicans to speak to each other without literally flinging objects at each other. Because for one thing, we need to realize that's not going to convince other people. So I think it's respect for other people's opinions. It's realizing that if somebody does not agree with you, it's not a slam at you personally. We personalize so many of these things. We are discussing political points of view, and I may be wrong, I may be right, and at the end of the day, none of us can see over that horizon. We just are expressing our opinions. And I want to say something else which I think is a bit, as my brother here said, maybe kind of off topic. I think one of the things that makes our civil discourse less civil and less productive is the proliferation of guns. Because I think that when you are in a meeting, when you are in a public meeting, and you are worried that 75% of the people there may disagree with you, A, and be armed, it is going to chill your willingness to say something which is your opinion, but which you may think may come back on you. And I have actually read articles which I think are fascinating, that the proliferation of guns in our society chills our First Amendment right to civil and civic discourse. And I think that's something worth thinking about.
Sure.
May I just comment?
Yes, please do. And then I have a final question for you, and then we'll open it to the audience.
As some of you were coming in, and I was talking to a few people in the audience, and one of the persons from the audience said, "Can we ask any questions?" I said, "Obviously, you should be able to ask without any fear. This is a place where we mutually will exchange ideas that will help each other. This is the forum for that purpose. If we can't do it in the public square, this is an environment in which we can do it." So this question that was asked was answered, fortunately, but there should be no questions left that you go outside and say, "I should have asked," and nobody answered my question.
Sure. So the last question for you is, Manharji, is for any, again, this came from the audience while registration. For any normal individual, is your religion in your dress, in your actions, in your education, or your love for your motherland?
I don't have a motherland or a fatherland. Any place that I stay is my home. This is my country. This is my home. So for me, there's no such thing as that country or there where I was born. Where I stay is my home, where I put my head and where I rest is what I have to protect. This is very simple for me. It doesn't require much thinking. And the second part of your question is it?
Was the same thing. Is it in your actions, in your education, or in your dress, the religion?
Religion is not only in your action or your dress. It's in your behavior to your fellow beings. How do you treat others with respect? How do you allow the others to speak and engage in conversation so you learn from them? Generally speaking, we all want to have rights, but we're forgetting our duties. Our duties are to our fellow beings, being able to express what they want to say before we express it, and giving them that forum to speak without fear. And most of the time we want to say, it's my right under my Second Amendment, I should be able to say what I want. No, wait a minute, forget my rights. I want to hear what are my duties. Are my duties to protect what he's got to say? That should be my first duty. And if I'm not willing to do that, then I have no right to speak.
Great, thank you so much. So thank you, panelists. This is our final set of questions from already asked questions and the ones that I had compiled. But I would like to open the floor right now for the audience. If you're interested, please come forward and you can ask the question through this mic so people can hear better. Are there any questions? Or by the time you decide to come forward, we will also have other questions here.
So the question is for everybody.
Can please also ask your name and...
My name is Parikshit Sharma. The question is for everyone. So basically, most of the items that were discussed by each one of you were out of the fact that there is only the one. That there is the one, all of people talk about the one. And that is how we should think about love and togetherness, because in the end, everybody is for the one. However, we do know that there is polytheism in many people's head. So how does each one of you and each one of your scriptures talk about polytheism? And what do you guys think about handling and again, mutually respecting the people who are polytheists, atheists, no theists, or anti-theist, or whatever they are. So that's the question for each one of you.
Thank you. Do you want to start, Dr. James? And we go from this side if all of you want to answer or whoever wants to answer.
Let me put it this way. Need to talk about the politics of monotheism, the history of monotheism. That did come, of course, mostly with dominant religions, the ones that are sitting here, but me growing up a Dalit, we did believe in existence of many divine beings, and the more centralized the power in society became, the more sophisticated and refined, stronger became faith in one God, because you don't want to have many political centers. Didn't respond to you? Of course, there is something that we need to be aware. In each tradition, despite, I'm talking about Christianity, let's say, in Jewish wisdom in the beginning, they were openness and space for what you call God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God who sees, God who hears. There was that openness. I think we should be able to know why monotheism has emerged and see space within each of the monotheist religions for the other within the one. Opening up, that's, thank you for the question, that's a brilliant point.
So basically what you're saying is that monotheism, which is the basis of all the love that you guys have shared, is not always needed, and it's stemming up from the need of having centralized power, centralized control and everything.
Let me put it this way. God who is one is also many. Okay. If there is no openness for the many in one is not one. That's one. The second thing is, the one who cannot accommodate the other cannot be the one. I think that's the basis of the inclusiveness. The many polycenteredness is the basis of and should be the basis of one. And that's what I think my Hindu friends and especially those Christians, Muslims, Buddhists and Hindus in India, the beauty of it is we are able to accommodate many and yet believe in one. And that takes different shapes. And I think it's a balance that we need to continue to work on. And of course, my friends can chip in.
Okay. Okay, go ahead. Last one.
Thank you so much. Boy, I'm going to say, by the way, I turn around because I want to.
You're doing a good place to go.
I'm going to say, all these questions that are coming up, beautiful and very thought-provoking. These are deep questions, and I thank you for it. First question, we talk about D1. The way best I know, the various faiths have a different picture of D1, even though we talk about D1. When we define D1, and please don't take it that I'm talking negative or positive, I'm just simply trying to see the differences. D1 in Christianity can have a son, not in Sikh faith, even though we talk about D1. So first is, we need to know what are we talking about D1, and I am not aware of other faiths, how they did. I would say in Sikh philosophy, the way the Sikh scriptures talk about D1, number one, it says nobody can know it all. Nobody can know D1 completely. We are limited, D1 is unlimited. But whatever we have read is more like D1 not having any form. He's not like human, or the human is not in his form. That's the philosophy. D1 doesn't have a form. D1 is more described more like the energy that we talk about in science. Now, then was question about, I think the second part was something to do with different genders and atheists and so on. I'm going to go back to respond to that question right from the basic belief. There is D1, and then everything is D1's creation. Those who believe in D1 are the creation of D1, and those who don't believe in D1 are also the creation of D1. So they are as good brothers and sisters as any. And the question comes in, what does faith think about lesbians, gays, and stuff? Are they the creation of D1? That's the answer. Thank you.
That is a great question. At One World, what we say is we honor all paths to God, and we assist each other on our own spiritual journeys. And the way, let me just tell you a short personal story. The way I came to it is I grew up as an Episcopalian, a Protestant Christian, and I had trouble with the Trinity. I never understood it. I had some real problems with it. And you're really laughing. And so I just kept feeling that in the world there was what I called a harmonic, a true note that joins us all together, that animates us and enlivens us and gives us creativity and life and joy. And I kept looking for that. And so it brought me to New Thought, and it brought me to Interfaith. And what we teach at One World is that there is the one, but it's not a monotheistic kind of one. Because when I think of monotheism, I think of duality. And I think that I'm worshiping a God up there of which I am not. So, like my brother here, I think, and what we believe, if I can say we believe in it, I mean, we're a very motley crew. I think my music director is a pagan. So, I can't really say we all believe one thing. But there is that one energy that permeates us all, that animates us all, that we are all of. And there are different manifestations of it. So, for example, if I think of the God of this tree, or the God of that river, or the God of music, or I think of the different Hindu avatars, all faces of the same one. I don't think of many different gods, because if you have many different gods, it means that God is limited. It means that this God is that God, and that God is that God. And God is, in my view, is not limited.
But infinity plus infinity is still infinity.
I did so bad at math. Okay, yes, I totally believe you. But I believe in a concept it's called panentheism, which is that God is all there is and then more so. So maybe my God is as bad at math as I am, but it's all, there's no place that God is not. Charles Fillmore said once, think of God as a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. So wherever you are at the center of God. And wherever I am at the center of God. And God is big enough for all of it. But at One World, we call God God's spirit, creative mind, universal energy. There was one talk I gave where there's a lady, an author named Anne Lamott. She called God Howard because a friend of hers said, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." So she just called him Howard. And we've done that sometimes too. So it doesn't matter what you call him, it, her, whatever. It's just that energy without which we would not be here. So the term monotheism is kind of limiting because I think of it as a dualistic sense. I did a series once on the three faces of God, which is a concept from Ken Wilber, or at least he teaches it. And it's God as me, God as everything that is, and then God in relationship. The me, thou. And we in order to have a healthy spirituality, I think we need to have an understanding of all three faces. So that's probably a bit more complex than I needed to be, but anyway, thank you for your time.
Just a very quick comment. She's very right what she says, and I accept that. It's a wonderful answer. The question is, I, you, him, or her, or it, whatever. Creation is one, not two. And you cannot have it separate. And if you think of God as, are you God? Am I God? Is she God? Everybody has that spark of divinity in them. It's when it awakens, they become perfect human beings. That's the only difference.
So, Manharji, something to follow up. Someone recently asked me, who's your God? Or something like, whom do you see in God? And that person happens to be a male. And I said, you are my God. I see God in you. And he started getting all the other thoughts. But my feeling is, I see God in everyone. And it's so hard for me to take it off. I think in the beginning you said divinity is in everyone. So, Jabarji, do you want to answer, respond, follow up to the question? And who want to ask the other questions? I know Ram, Hina. Okay, you. I didn't get your name. Syed. Okay, and then Roland. I think you have a question here that you had put, and I didn't ask. So please, and then yourself, and then I didn't get your name. John. Okay, awesome.
So, Sister Nazeera, are you planning to serve dinner anytime soon?
I'm going to get put on the coffee.
I think so.
We all can go for the interfaith dinner.
Yeah, I think we're going to be expecting dinner soon. But yeah, I think this is. I remember when I was in LA, and there was some graffiti that was done in one of the Sikh temples, one of the Sikh gurdwaras, and then following there was graffiti done on a Hindu temple, and I told my community in LA, let's reach out. We're going to reach out. And this is post San Bernardino. There was a big backlash that LA was feeling. People that were wearing any headgear, like our beloved brother there, or Basiji that he was wearing, they'll be attacked in public. Some people would say, hey, raghead, or something really impolite. So when I told my community that, hey, let's reach out to the Hindu community, let's reach out to the Sikh community, and at times the Jewish community because of being a minority. So one of the common questions is like, but aren't they different? Do we not disagree with them? And I told him I never came across the Quran or the teaching of the Prophet where he said that disagreement means division. So I think it is surreal to deny the differences. Like if I go and say Islam and Hinduism are the same, that's not true. If I say, hey, Islam and Christianity are the same, that's not true. We have similar values, but we can't just go around acting like we're the same, or else why would we have interfaith? It would be just one faith. Right? So I think the differences are there. But I think at the end, what does your faith teach you? So in our faith, it's about the very concept of God. God doesn't have gender. God is all powerful. In being most powerful, God is not in need. Need is a attribute of creation. So when you ascribe partners to God, it is blasphemy because it is ascribing partners to the most supreme, the one who is not in need. So these are very, differences in our theology that makes us different. But in our faith, what teaches us is that you can't look down upon somebody because of faith. Why? One of my teachers told me that our belief is that, yes, we are different. If you follow a different religion, the reason I believe it I'm a Muslim is because I believe the truth is in Islam. Although I honor all the other faiths, I don't look down upon them. It's a sin to look down upon people of other faith. So one of the things that my teacher, he told me, he was saying that, you are a star. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you see, even if you look physically, from the Big Bang, matter, space, and time. These are three. And that same matter that makes stars, you're that same matter. You are made from that same matter. So when you look at those stars, you have divinity. The command that God has brought life within you from a dead drop of fluid that God has given you life. There is divinity you show, but I think it's about how to respect one another, and not to live in a surreal life where we say that we're all the same. So for me personally, being different does not mean to be divided. Yes.
So I'm going to move on because of the questions we have. So I'm going to ask, are you done, Imam Jaber, answering the questions? Because I have a queue in place. So Ram, you are next. If you want to come forward so everybody can see you and hear. And thank you, Ram, for setting up the mic. So thank you so much for
I have a specific question for Imam, especially with respect to the data that you said FBI published. So I have here with me from FBI site from stats from 1980 to 2005 for a span of about 25 years. And the bottom line is it says the number of people killed is 3,178, of which 2,977 is from 2001, the 9/11. Okay, and injured is 14,000, of which 12,000 is also from 9/11. So how do you explain this? This is purely Islamic. 9/11 is purely Islamic.
So I'll give you an example. With regards to, for example, it's whether you're saying one of the things that we were trying to kind of bring the White House's attention to is when you say Islamic terrorism, all you're doing is you're feeding into the monster. You're feeding into the monster. If that is Islamic, then what am I doing here? I should be kind of choking Melanie right now. Sister Nazeera wouldn't put this together. So you're looking at a religion that is 1.8 billion. So my thing is looking at the reason behind why. So when you look at the reason behind why, majority of places that are completely in political turmoil, you're looking at a post-colonial effect when rulership was gone. Look, it's literally from the pan to the fire. Colonials pulled out, the colonizers pulled out, and then you have dictators that came in, right? You look at Egypt, you look at Syria. So whenever there is this idealistic approach, you have religious preachers that are coming with ideals to give a sense of belonging. People jump on board. But if you look at, for example, in India, for example, when there was conflict between the Muslims and the Hindus, and in Gujarat where a majority Hindu went in, you can't say that's Hindu violence. That's human violence. So that's my first take. When you and I say Christian violence, Jewish violence, you're only feeding into the monster. Because it's not faith, it's a misunderstanding of faith or hatred. So I think it's a human problem. If you look at the worldview, the FBI statistics that they showed, if you look at the worldview, the percentage of terroristic attacks that are carried out, or attempts, right now, it's over 150,000. If you look at that percentage, the amount is 94% outside. And this is from the early 1900s, right? So again, it looks, if you're looking at specifically in America, and specifically from specific date, you are going to get specific numbers. But what I would suggest is if you look at the FBI's website and look at their statistics, what you will see. Because when we say Islamic violence, or Islamic extremism, or Jewish extremism, all we're doing is feeding into that same monster that's dividing all of us again, right?
Awesome. Hina, you're next. If you want to come forward. And Hina is a very good friend, and as well as very involved in the BAPS community. If none of you have visited the BAPS temple, please make it one of your. Roland, you love the building, you love the atmosphere. I went as a chief guest in one of the women's conference to the BAPS temple during the women's conference, and the adults started touching my feet. And I was like, what? Like, I'm supposed to do it with the seniors. And the kids started doing that, and the adults older than me started touching my feet. And I'm like, what's going on? And then and then Hina told me, everybody is equal in this. Once they enter here into the temple, everybody is equal. And they seek, they'll burn. Yes, yeah. Go ahead, Hina.
Thank you, Nazeera. Thank you so much for having all of us here. I'm sure each one of you is appreciating the time that we're spending here. So my question was, I'm always all about solutions. I don't care what happened in past. I am always concerned about our future. Now, I'm blessed to be teaching at the BAPS Swaminarayan Temple, and my students are 7th and 8th grader girls. I started getting questions from them. When we talk about any kind of spiritual or personal development related subjects, the question I had was, so what is Jainism? Do they do the same that we are doing? Are they fearful of their religion, or are they happy in their religion? And I was really surprised by those questions, because They are 7th, 8th graders. They are soon to be high schoolers and adults. By now, these questions should have been answered already. By that I mean, by the time they enter middle school, they should be knowing what's going on around them. They should be knowing who their fellow student is, or they should be knowing how to respect the religion of his or her best friend. They should not be questioning these questions, wandering still around, and then when they enter college, they hear something and they start reacting the way we have done it in past. So one question I am asking all of you, what's the solution? And I was really surprised by Melanie's research result that 75 to 90% of Fulton County residents are going as nuns.
No, 34%.
Right, but like majority of them were like now increasing that, okay, I don't want to follow any religion. Because for me, that's fearful. For me, religion is not something that you force on people, but religion is something that you need, being a human, to understand other human. It doesn't matter which religion you follow, but it does matter that you follow a religion or a faith to understand and respect and love other human being. And if those people, I'm not saying they are spiritually very inclined, but they are not following religion, that's okay. That's always okay. But if millennials are deciding to go that way, for me personally, that's not correct. That's not where they should be going. Because religion binds us. Religion controls us when we are going the wrong way. There are leaders in our religions, in everybody's religion, who leads us, who helps us when we are almost taking the wrong path. And these young kids, they are so fragile. They can enter in wrong paths so easily. And if they are deciding to not to go and follow any religion, that's scary for me. So my question is, what's the solution? One thing that I was thinking while sitting there, start educating them when they are in elementary school. I had a very good opportunity to present on Indian holiday, which was Diwali, in my daughter's, the elder daughter's class when she was in kindergarten. Now she's a 3rd grader, so her teacher approached me, asked me, will you be willing to present on Diwali, because my kids wants to learn about holidays around the world. Why can't we teach them religions around the world? That way they will be at least knowledgeable. When they hear Muslims, they will not be scared. When they hear Christian, they will not be scared that, oh, they will force me to become a Baptist. No. That's not all Christianism about. So I need a solution before I go out of this room so that I can practically apply it. Thank you.
Great question.
One education, completely agreed. I have a 14-year-old, 13-year-old. I do tell them, creative God is so creative. God has created many in many ways. Theologically, sociologically, people find meaning many ways, respect them. Education. Ambedkar would say, do what we are doing now, eat with the other. Because fear of the different is natural. That comes out of behavioral sciences, that it comes out of self-preservation instinct. It somehow the signals say other is different. No, it's natural, but do one thing. Ambedkar would say, sit at the table, eat with the other. You may not enjoy a non-vegetarian, but still sit and eat with others. That's one. The second thing is, listen to the other, bring the other to the table. And today, we had Muslim, Sikh, Hindu, Christian, and we thought we'll talk about a Dalit, in Ambedkar. always, that's what I would say, if you are a white congregation, do a study on Frederick Douglass. So let the victim be part of your conversation, and that's what you have done. And I think there are few ways upon the Jewish wisdom says, seek peace, pursue it, it is not ready-made. Until you find it, begins with education, interdining, and making friends of other faiths and listening to the victim. Thank you.
Great question, by the way.
Very good. Yes.
Wow. I'm going to again say, beautiful question. Thank you so much. However, I'm going to differ with you. Do we need everybody to follow a religion, whatever they choice? Or is the purpose to have a better world to live in? The values. What is religion teaches us? The values. Different religions in different worlds just teach us to be a better human being. So the objective is not to follow a religion, objective is to be a better human being. Even if a person is atheist, if the values they carry are humanitarian, doesn't matter. Now, in our scripture, there's an example and similar, and I'll share with you in simpler words. D1 is perfect. D1, he created D1, it or he or she created a perfect creation. And I'm going to give an example of, think of a master painter that starts with a canvas, a few brushes and a few colors. Ends up with a beautiful painting. Each brush stroke is a little different in thickness, in color, in many other ways. But if there was one brush stroke that was missing out of the whole painting, it won't be as good. Look at the same picture. Each individual that D1 created according to D1's plan. The whole thing is according to D1's plan. And if there are atheists, that is also part of the plan. What we need in this world, in this creation, the whole thing is the values, regardless of where they come from. It doesn't matter what faith or no faith. So I think what we need to teach our next generation is values. And you know where we teach them? We teach them at home. We teach them in the family. We teach them in schools. And then we teach them in religious centers. It used to be that the religious centers were the main educational facility, and now it's different. But it is, again, I'm repeating myself, we need to stop teaching them negative. We means my kids at my home, in my school, and in my religious place. We don't need to say to anybody, we are better and they are not. There is no they. We don't know. Thank you.
Very good. I don't know if I disclose this, Hina is still going to remain my friend, but I call myself belonging to a humanitarian religion, if it exists. And I have 2 small kids, and people ask them, who's your God? They don't know Allah's name. They have heard of Jesus in their school, but I tell them God is in your heart. I tell them love and compassion is God. I tell them if someone is falling in front of you, you pick them up. You give them your hand. And that is religion. If your teacher asks you, anybody asks you, that is your God. The love and compassion in your heart is your God. So Hina, I'm still your friend, but guess what? I'm a very more competitive advantage than you, because if I have any problem today, I'll have coffee with Manharji. I'll have dinner with Imamji. I'll call in midnight to Melanie and say, hey, I have a problem, how do I move forward? And the same I'll do with Basiji as well. Because all of them for me is everything in my heart. I believe all of them are gods, all of you. So I know it sort of sounds different. People think I'm crazy, but I'm sorry, and that's where I found the religious freedom, accepting, and that's why I love doing interfaith, because I think there's so much that everybody can learn. And when my kids grow up and become 18, they can decide which one they are more apt to, but that's the truth.
Yeah, so it was the similar mindset that I came here with, because that's how my parents brought me up. We used to go to the Golden Temple in Amritsar because my mama used to live there. And whenever I see a man with turban and the beard, I light up, because that's how I grew up. Whenever I used to go to visit my uncle in Amritsar, I go there, so the Golden Temple, and I have seen the happy faces, the amount of seva they do, the volunteerism, and that's how I want my kids to grow up. So they should be happy. They should not be scared.
Oh, yes.
That's my one
So
thing.
education,
And education is my
young.
point. That yes, the way I honor, I respect, I love other human beings, no matter what religion they belong to. I don't see. I'm scared that my kids will not be able to live that life because the world around is scary for them right now.
Sure.
When
And
they talk
that's-
about religions.
And I guess one of the
And the
smallest
way,
solutions.
I'm sorry, I'm still going on. The way we teach them about self-defense, that is a critical part now. I think they should be knowledgeable about this part too, because it's kind of social defense.
Definitely.
And as I said, it's so easy for them to go the wrong way
Definitely.
if they don't know the reality.
Definitely, yes, it could go completely against each other. The smallest one is you have all these leaders here.
Mhm.
The next time you have a gathering, invite one of them. And like they said, dine with one of with your group, and make that happen vice versa. So the last two questions before we end the session
if you don't mind, because that is really a great question, can you give me 2 minutes to give my
Sure.
views on it?
Sure, if we can just, because I'm following the lead.
The thing that we came here is to know the main answer is for the
Solution.
question. And if I leave this room without telling
Sure.
what I want to tell, I feel
So,
bad.
so can you tell me your name?
Siva.
Siva. So Syed, John left, so you're lucky,
Yeah.
you're next.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so after Syed, I'm just going as a moderator,
Yeah, sure,
whoever,
sure.
making sure whoever raised their hands, and Roland, definitely, and Nate, but I'm doing this the last two, so probably Syed and Nate, and since Roland is here, I'm gonna give him, Syed, why don't you come forward?
No, I can speak from here.
Oh, if you wish, yes. Mike, okay, you need a mic.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum everybody. Looking into this meeting, it reminds me typical Indian environment. Starting from eternity, we used to have interfaith communications, whether it is a place where the king is sitting or where it's a place where religious leaders are sitting. They used to intercommunicate, interfaith discussion, and the problem of the current society. And they came up with solution most of the time. That's why India became the teacher of the world. Not from now, but from thousands of years ago. Whether it is the Darbar of Akbar, where all these people will be discussing and talking, and then coming up with solution or no solution, but they will discuss. Everything was open and free, and if nobody wants to tolerate it, he can leave it or go somewhere else. This is the tradition of Akbar. And even from there. So looks like now we are seeing in America, which is like a mini India, where now we have interfaith discussions, where now we have economic discussions, we have political discussions. It was not the way in America before. America was different, but now it has changed, and it has changed for better. But my question is, the system which America developed, which is secular, which is with human rights, with democratic values, has created the best country in the world. There is no parallel what America is today. So why don't we going back to the venue of religion and going back to the time which is like 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, or 3,000 years ago, we follow what we have and we improve on it. And that should be the secularism, which teaches you respect of all faiths, and the human rights, which allows you to speak, freedom of expression. This is what is missing when you put religion in place. Because if you start teaching religion from in school, you are defying the US Constitution, which says religion and government is different, is separate. But the system which is developed here is what we need to build on. So instead of going back to the values of religion, and I'm sure that none of the religion actually can stand the test of science. Because science basically has rejected all religion to be fake, baseless, and have no real facts in it. They are all imaginations, theories, and assumptions. So we build on what we have here. And what we have here is secularism, human rights, and freedom of expression. These values, if we export to the countries like Muslim countries, where you cannot have this kind of, there's no way you can have a meeting like this in Saudi Arabia, or a meeting like this in Pakistan. It used to be 40 years ago, before the Arabs got oil and they introduced the radical Islam. Before radical Islam, Pakistan was same like India. We used to sit down, meet with everybody, eat with everybody, discuss whatever we want to say, expose our opinion, and have complete freedom of expression. That has changed. Now it has become totally closed society, controlled and enveloped by religion, which is really what is creating the problem. The radical Islam is also the byproduct of that. In Pakistan, we could have never thought that a Shia will kill Sunni. My neighbor was Shia. We used to attend all their meetings. Now they don't want to tolerate. The Shias have been declared non-Muslim. They want to kill them. Same is the case in Iran. Sunni cannot survive there. So you cannot have a Shia. If a Shia speaks up, they put him in jail. So that is, we need to explore what America is about. Means the values of America, which has created a country never seen on the face of the earth. Thank you.
Did you have a follow-up on?
Can I just say one quick thing?
Yes.
I think that one of the things you're talking, well, I have two things to say in response to your question. One is that religion for me is very important, as I'm sure it is for you, I sense from your question, in terms of finding meaning and direction and power in my life. I think one thing that young people need to develop, whether they find it in religion or elsewhere, because I cannot tell them religion is the place to find it for them, is meaning. There was a guy named Viktor Frankl who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and he was a victim of the Nazi concentration camps, and what he found was that the difference between prisoners who lived and prisoners who died were prisoners lived if they felt their lives had meaning. And I think that's one thing we can teach our kids is that they do. And whether they find it in religion, there are some who do and there are some who don't. And I cannot say for them which is better. My wife, I think, is an agnostic, but she's one of the most kind and wonderful and loving and effective people I've ever met. And I have no doubt that when I end up in heaven, she's going to be like right there. I don't care what she says about what she believes or what she doesn't say. The other thing I want to say is I think what you're calling for is more what I call cultural literacy. And that is being able to tell that a Sikh is not a Muslim, and that a Jain is not a Baha'i, or whatever. And the way we do that is, I think, and that's not teaching religion, that's teaching culture. Because one thing we are, I mean, you talk about the American experiment, and the American experiment is inclusion and welcoming of all different people. This is the fabric of our civic society, and it's wonderful, and it's all these different stripes. So that's one thing, that's how I would answer your question.
So the only thing is dealing with youth. I think one of the main things when we were talking about education, you have to teach them. Guess what? I mean, you're dealing with youth. They don't want to learn. They're not, I'm going to be honest, they don't want to learn. So my thing is, like, for example, right now during Irma, did it really matter what religion somebody came from? Really? Did it really matter what religion they came from? What lifestyle they came? The mosque throughout Atlanta, we hosted over 500 people. Over 500 people. And again, I'm not saying this for any other reason, but when you show people what faith is, that's when they fall in love. So we had Hispanics, blacks, atheists, lesbians. You even had their dogs with them and cats with them, and we welcomed them, you know? And so my thing with youth is stop preaching to them. Religion, faith is not preaching, it's practice, right? So I remember when the Jewish community called me in and they said, well, what do you do as a youth director to bring them in? Practical faith. Let them go feed them. Have they ever been to, do they do visiting the sick? Do they visit the sick in the hospital? That's part of our faith, visiting people that are in need. Part of my faith is that if you go to sleep and your neighbor is hungry, you're not a Muslim. Do they know that? So our job is we tell you, go meet your neighbors and see if they have a need. You know? So practical, the practicality of faith has gone. And that's why we may say that, so, you know, the brother was saying that success is in the secular state. But as people of faith, we know the word secular itself, if you look at the etymology of what secular means that which is devoid of divine. By its definition, you can't have a purpose. Because if you don't, for people of faith, we believe that if you don't believe in a higher being, you don't have purpose in life. You have to either believe that there is a supreme being who you are held accountable to be one, or you have to succumb to the fact that you are the result of cosmic dust, cosmic wind, and chance. And you can't have meaning in life, right? So, I mean, I don't think it's about going secular or, looking up. God has given everybody value. America, sometimes we may think America has one of the bloodiest past in humanity. You gotta read. Go ask the African Americans how advanced America is. Until 50 years ago, Melanie couldn't sit here. Until 50 years ago, the country, I love America. Look, this is my country, but we can't shy away from our problems. Go read the book, White Rage, written by a professor from Emory University, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So to be blindsided, and not one of the biggest crimes that America had committed was not to give humanity to people who deserve humanity. Right? 50 years ago, homosexuality was a mental disease. It was in the medical books as a mental disease. So I say that I respect what the brother is saying, but this whole acceptance, everybody has a dark past. There's a shadow that follows everybody. You can't escape that. But that's the second part. But I think when it comes to the youth, it's the practical aspect of faith.
And they love that.
They love that. I mean, I take them to go feed the hungry. I don't tell them anything about Islam.
Amen.
When we're done, I'm like, hey, the prophet used to feed the poor? And they're like, seriously, he did? That's it. Because you can't indoctrinate them. They hate being indoctrinated. So my thing is stop teaching them. Show them. And that's what's amazing what you're saying when you go to the Golden Temple. You didn't hear preaching. You saw.
Yes, I saw.
Today they don't see. They don't see Christianity. They don't see Judaism. They don't see the sick faith. We want to see. My generation wants to see because we live in a world where you have to see to believe.
I think I'll answer her question very specific from BAPS. Am I correct? Swami Munik Tilak Swami, wonderful youth leader. And I talk to him many times when I come there. And he's one of the few forward-looking persons. Yes. And the reason I specifically mention him is because every faith, religion, or group has certain practices that they fall within that has boundaries. And you can't go outside those boundaries. For example, women have to sit separately if you want to go to a Baptist temple. Whether I want to or not is a second story. But that's the way they practice their faith. No problem for me. But the issue comes up, which she says, I'm fearing for my daughter or my son or for my child. Future. I said, future is nothing to worry about. We have enough structure in humanity that we've already built with so many different faiths. Pick the one that works best for you. You pick BAPS, perfectly fine. It will work for you. If your children follow you, great. If my daughter, my son says, no, Dad, I don't like this, I want that, pick it. If it works better for you, that's your path. That's your choice. That's your freedom. That's your free will. So we live in that world where children are going to experiment. They're going to pick the path that works for them. And I say, more power to them. Because I come from a faith where I found my own answers to my questions. So I follow it. If I didn't, I would have picked another faith. I'm a Hindu. My wife is a Muslim. My daughter is a Christian. One house. How can we live three together? Think about it.
That's what we call oneness.
So, Siva, it's your turn. Make it short because I want to get the final thoughts on each of them. And I have a Siva picture in my house. I carry the Bhagavad Gita in my car.
Sure.
So, and it feels good, like you said, Manharji, many things in one single thing. So go ahead, Siva.
Can we turn that?
Yes, Siva, can you turn? Yeah. It's on.
It's on now. Okay. Hi everyone, and
Toward the camera. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
It's a little.
Okay. I'm very glad to be here because I am like-minded to of people like you, and I heard all the lecture given by all the people here. I'm really glad to listen all these things because I feel like I'm in a right place. So one thing I want to know, actually I thought of asking the question what she asked as a question I want to ask, as if I want to know the answer, but you all answered it very well. But I just want to say what I know about this. So first of all, we are from Traita Thiram or Traita Siddhantam, like three soul concept. So our Guru Sri Acharya Prabodhananda Yogeshwar wrote 90 books. So till like 5 years back, I was like searching the same way, like what are these religions? And why I am a Hindu, and why I am hating a Muslim, why I am hating a Christian, like that. But the thing is, the religion, like 5,000 years back, Sri Krishna told Bhagavad Gita. And 2,000 years back, 2,500 years or 2,000 years back, Jesus told Bible. And 1,400 or 1,500 years back, Muhammad told, with the help of Jibril, he given us Quran. So all these three are three divine books. That means they are the real base of religion, right? We all are here talking about the religion. So, and we are thinking to resolve some things that this religion built. So for example, I'm from here to reach a destination. Destination is the one, the God, the supreme power for everyone who is created us. So to reach there, one person said to use bicycle, the other person said to use car, the other person is saying to use some bullock cart. So whatever it may be, it's all the way, the path that used to reach there. We all forget that, and we are quarreling or discussing about this bicycle, this cart, and all the extra features outside we build. For example, in Bhagavad Gita, if you take Purushottam Prapti Yoga 16 and 17th verses, it told the three souls, Kshara, Akshara, and Purushottama. Means Jivatma, Atma and Paramatma is nothing but mortal soul, immortal soul, and absolute soul. The same is said in Bible, that is in Matthew 28:19, they said it as the Son, Father, and Holy Spirit. The same said in Quran, in Qaf Surah 50th Surah 21st ayat, that is, there is a soul coming to the earth with a witness and a driver. So, we all are ignoring the basic rule of what God is saying. He said the path, but on top of the path we built cycle, bullock cart and car, and we are quarreling about these three things. So she said, is there an education? Is there a way my kids can know that what is God? So for example, if I teach a Muslim kid, what is 3 into 3? 9. What is 3 into 3 for Christian? 9. What is 3 into 3 for Christian or Hindu? 9. Why? Because they are built on a rule. It's a sashana or shastra. So, the maths, the physics, the chemistry, or the astrology, all these built on a fact that are readable by our 5 senses. Whichever, the human will believe something that his sense can understand. For example, if I say one person that you calculate 3 into 3, is it coming 9? So he can prove it and show to us, that's why he is believing. Whereas coming to Brahma Vidya Shastra or the divine science or the spiritual science, these are beyond the 5 senses. The 6 or 7 sense we need to say. So those things only we can tell based on the divine books given by God. if you dig into the three divine books, Bhagavad Gita and Bible and Quran, they are saying the same thing. But these are cards we built, that's fine, because they all are taking to the same path. But we shouldn't be quarreling with these and ignore the real intention of God on why this is built. He didn't build that. In any of the divine books, God never said about religion, he said about the path. No one can show in Bhagavad Gita he talked about a religion. No one can say about in Bible he talked about a religion. No one can say in Quran he talked about a religion. They three talked about the same path, about the same God, about the same concept. In this Traita Siddhantam or the Traita Theorem, the Guru given 90 books till now, which are even science cannot prove till today. Because this is also a science. No one is understanding that the Brahma Vidya Shastra is also a science. As these four are worldly related science, this is spiritual related science. To understand this, only our intellect can tell us. So, I'm taking more time?
Yeah,
okay.
We want to sort of end it up, but I think we understood the gist of where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So
Thank
so
you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Or just to give it a try to read what is said in there, it will definitely help you in cutting the root of these differences that we built up on these three different vehicles that we are traveling. We can follow in any of the vehicles, but we can respect the other things.
Awesome, yes, and I think that was the core message. So Nate, we have to sort of finish up. I had promised Roland that he'll just give a quick final thought, and then I'm going to have 20 seconds from each of the panelists to finish up with a final thought, because I know the photographer also has to leave. But again, we're all here even after to grab some coffee, tea and all that. So Roland, quickly.
I'm going to defer my questions because it was answered brilliantly by a lot of the discourse that ensued, and this young man did a phenomenal job, whether he understands what he did or not. And it was going to be about the practical display of love as it comes out of the structure where each of you sit. But I'm going to enjoy talking, getting to know you. I could take the posture that I'm most different from everybody in this room. That's debatable, but I'm here because of those differences. And so I'm going to enjoy talking to you and calling you my friend for the future going forward.
Very nice, thank you. Manharji, thank you so much. So before I thank the audience and everyone, quick final thought, and I want to finish this in 2 minutes.
How about 4 words? Be good, do good.
Amen.
That's what I'm thinking about. The Mother Teresa was asked about what is the biggest problem with humanity, and she said that the biggest problem with humanity is that we draw our family circle too small. And they said, "What do you mean by that?" And she said that, we usually identify with people of our own ethnicity, own family, own bloodline, lineage, or faith. But in God's eye, you're one family. And that's what man has done by, whether it's imaginary lines or so. So having said that, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon all of them, all the prophets, he had said that the best amongst you are those who are the most in service to humanity.
Amen.
And that is the measuring stick of faith.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for having me here today. I've really enjoyed it. And the only thing that comes to mind when Nazeera said you have 20 seconds was that quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He doesn't, and this is a paraphrase, but he doesn't look for fancy temples. He says, my philosophy is kindness. And I think if we keep that, I think we can't go wrong.
You have to do the twist all the time.
Everybody has shared wonderful thoughts. So there's hardly much left for me. He's already done it. Mostly the religious people are looking for creator, the God, we call it, the one. And some of us go and look in this building or that building or that building. Sikh faith is teaching us, look in this building. Thank you so much. Now, I'm going to end with all those who want to tear down the walls of religion and want to enjoy a little dance together, please stay around.
I would say 2 sentences, of course. Look for similarities but be open, respect, and embrace differences.
So please know that you are welcome to follow the same model in your own religious faith institutions. Invite leaders. Shiva, you did a great job. I wish you would invite them all to your institution and educate more, because I think what we've done here, we will not do justice if we just keep it here. This has to come out. You can share it with 10 people. Bakshiji, thank you so much for being here. I'm not calling you out, but I have Bakshiji's award. So they're humanitarians as well. They recognize the people, the good community people. So thank you again. As action steps, kindness, love, peace, compassion, teach your kids, expose them to the other things that's happening around them, and let's leave the negativity and the fear apart. And when you see them hearing, don't ignore it. Try to express, try to answer it to the best positive level with the knowledge that you have. So thank you again so much for a wonderful Saturday evening. Who's ready for Bhangra and who's ready for dinner?
What about soccer?
I just have to find out the sponsor for dinner. But Bhangra we have, and we have tea.
And soccer.
And soccer,
Afterwards.
yes. And Chandrasekhar, if you can come forward very quickly, because he's the sponsor of the tea, and if you enjoyed everything, you see that his products is Nutrilite. I've tried those vitamins with my kids. They are the nature, call to nature logo. So quickly, few words, and then we'll disperse.
So just, I don't want to take much time. So initially, I agree with all, and as Manoharji told, think good, do good, be good. So that's what Bhagavad Gita, all the religion says. And coming to the business part, I'm not here to do any kind of business, because we all come from different places and we buy the products outside which are not genuine, and we spend money, and here we have top quality products and organic. So you can just try, and if you have any questions, you can get back to me. And thank you, and it was a wonderful session.
Great, thank you for the refreshment sponsorship. So thank you all so much. Please stay back and network with each other, collect their numbers, connect again after this in a continuous basis, because this is not one step, one all, begin all, end all. We've done our part, and it's you from your side. How can you do similar events in your part, and invite them to South Fulton or North Fulton, everywhere.
One word. Give a big applause to the